So doing another video, because I just do videos on questions that people ask me. A lot of people are mentioning about how to get sort of the free wins that we're told about with blue steel into green steel, because you don't just play the matchup, as sort of normal as you would. Dime is very less important. I think aerial is still quite an important factor of it. Tamato is less important. And it's more using the steel package and the herum to draw than it would be about Dime winning, closing the game out. The game will be a bit lower to the ground as well. I think Blue still has a very good chance into Green steel. I'm also going to cover as well how I'd play RP into discard, but I'll do that at the end of the video. So if you don't care about RP, it's fine. So the big two discard decks right now, of course, green steel, and I'll cover yellow green as well, because those two will be matchups that I think you'll definitely will see if you're expecting to do Seattle or just at store champs as well, just at any level. I'd expect to see those two decks. They're very powerful decks, and there's going to be people who have just really mastered it, especially with green steel getting its popularity back after its performance in Las Vegas, and people realizing that, oh wait a minute, just Prince John's a really good card, which was bonkers why it ever got cut to me. But here we are. So going into the green steel matchup, of course, when you play blind, you don't really know what you're playing into. You still just want to be looking for the ramp options and the 2-drop. But if we're going into the matchup and we know what we're playing against is green steel, I'd definitely be looking for an early answer to Diablo with Fire the Cannons. Because they, as inherently that isn't a discard card, it's a big part of their draw engine. It's their alternate draw engine. It's between that and Prince John. It's probably the better draw engine. I think it's more consistent. I just prefer consistent draw than something like Prince John, which, if you just have an empty hand, they can gas themselves out. So they'll definitely try and always hunt for that, and they'll try to get their Diablo shift line. What I tend to do is, try look for Fire the Cannons. Just one in hand, we fine. If you get two, that's a bit nicer because you can actually clear a bit more. But if they are to Diablo on turn 1, I will tend to Fire the Cannons that Diablo, mainly because it stops the play of turn 2 move to Cove, shift Diablo, and basically roll over you, and you have no chance of winning the game. And also what it does is it forces them to basically just play the Diablo on turn 3, which they'd rather be doing anything else. They'd rather be doing Ursula or Prince John on turn 3, so they can set up other draw mechanics and other powerful things, but they'll probably just play it out on turn 3, which isn't just it's just not an amazing play for them. They won't really want to do it, but it's an uninkable card, and they probably want to use the value in their hand. So they'll either do that, or you just know there's a Diablo set in their hand, and they never got the draw from it. And then from there as well, you can do things like, if we were playing the Magic Broom, and I definitely think in no wheel Magic Broom's awesome. And right now I've only got Argus in here because I just find RP is more popular in the region that I play in, but of course that could easily be swapped to the Magic Broom. You can play that down on 2 and just stop any sort of chance of them getting any draw package from it. And if they have to exert it, it's a lot of effort now because they have to try and deal the Magic Broom. They have to try find the Cove. They have to move it to the Cove, then exert it. And by that time, you might be just going over them anyway by playing Grab Your Swords and your Tinkerbells down and stuff like that. So definitely denying them that early power shift line on 2 is just a really good play. And I think into yellow-green, it's a lot more important because they will have bare necessities, so anything that's not a character in your hand is, fair game for them to take, because that card's just dumb how powerful it is. I should stop mocking Lorcana cards, really. But yeah, I definitely think in that scenario, you definitely just deny them the shift line, you destroy the 1-drop, force them to play it on 2, and at that point, you should possibly have answers like Grab Your Swords or Tinkerbell or something like that. But going back to yellow green, if you're not feeling like that, you just think I don't think they play Cove, and if they do, they've got a nuts hand anyway. You can just wait until they do the shift and then ping it. But I always find that's not amazing. That's just not really how I want to play it. The only benefit of that is it means you get to Porp School turn 1 to set up a Porp School. Then your turn 2 is a Fire the Cannons, because your turn 2 would basically not be anything else important. You don't really want to put a Smee down. Smee down is fine into yellow-green, I think, because it's going to get a lot of lore and they can't really bounce it that well. But into green steel, it's just to let the Storm Rage on target. So until you've got Cogsworth set up or you've got Tinkerbell or something bigger, I tend to find Smee on 2 is not as important. I might have mentioned in other places it is important, but it's feeling less and less important. Definitely in the later into the set, so that's sort of my advice. But yeah, plays Smee against yellow green is pretty nice because it's just going to sit there questing and die, and then that's cool. Yeah, and then going into the matchup, if they don't get the Diablo shift line going off, which is nothing to do with discard, so I don't know why I spent so long talking about Diablo shift line. Going Porpsicle into Tipo into herum is basically going to put you at a point where your hand advantage is so good, you should be drawing into another Porpsicle or Fortisphere, and you can basically be at a point where you negate them ever having any effect from their discard. The only effect they will have is if the Prince John set down, they can discard you and they can get some card draw from it. That will be the only benefit they have, really. If you're playing a whole new world variant of the deck, then that shouldn't matter either because you can just wield them. If you're not playing a whole new world, I still think it's fine because you'll be playing those bigger drop characters like in a no-wheel list, and you'll just basically be going over them with just playing aerials out and turning sideways and stuff like that, and just law race winning them. So yeah, the main thing that their deck will do is that they want you to play with no cards in hand, and they want to benefit from you having no cards in hand with the Prince John and the discard, and then they just want to basically turn sideways and win before you top deck something that gets you back into the game. And that's their entire game plan. That's pretty much all this card does. It's very strong, but a card like herum, it's a card that they can't really destroy very well. It requires 3 characters out, Ursula set up, and Sing Strength to kill it most efficiently. And then, of course, into yellow-green, if they Muse Bounce it, you'll be playing with 2 cards in hand. So if they Muse Bounce it, they're going to have to require to discard 3 cards from your hand, which isn't undoable, but it's still messy. And then after that, they're going to have to make... Because if you just play the herum out again, it should be fine. Just to get the card draw back in and try to get your hand size up. And then at this point, you'll be playing bigger characters, basically. And once you get a Cogsworth set down, you're only a top deck Grab Your Swords or top deck Wheel or top deck whatever, just to start, removing their board and just going over the Migabell. And a Cogsworth and a Tinkerbell is amazing. That's amazing for board control. I think on the draw, that's amazing just to win you back the game. But if you just want to go Cogsworth into Aerial, and then get a Chi and Po set up, you can entirely just valid to do that and just turn sideways. You probably won't even care what cards they have in their hand. They might use Bruno or Anna on Chi and Po, but also the Cogsworth Aerial is going to be quite painful. It's going to require that they Anna buff as well, or Cricky, because they just won't have attackers to kill the Aerial. A lot of their stuff has 1 to 2 attack. And then you've got, things like Tragic Beast and stuff like that, but still they'd only hit for 2. So it's going to be really awkward to deal with Aerial, and you should just be racing ahead with the lore anyway at that point. So that just tends to be how I like to play the matchup. I want to keep them in check a little bit, and then I can just go over them. And when you're into the later stages of the matchup, you remember that the majority of their deck is, I'm not going to call it combo pieces, but it's discard pieces, and it's things to make them do high roll plays. So, if you haven't seen a Hidden Cove early on, and you haven't seen it inked, the majority of the chances they're going to draw into a Hidden Cove, and that's just a really bad top deck for them. And they're going to draw into a Sudden Chill, and if you're at a point where, the game's sort of stabilized, drawing a Sudden Chill is just not going to do anything for them. They don't particularly have any big drops where it's like, I play this and the tempo just swings back into the other favor. The only thing they can think of is if a yellow-green just goes completely mad with drawing like You Have Forgotten Me's and Sudden Chills, and they just keep you out of the game. But as we found in the Whole New World builds, you can just be a top deck from Whole New World back into winning the game, and into No Wheel. You've got things like Simba and stuff like that, and Hades. And sometimes I've just felt like if every turn I'm playing a Hades or a Simba or an Arthur or an Ariel or something that's just bigger than them, or a Tinkerbell, I'll just play it every turn, and they'll be like, right, I have to respond to that, and then it'll be like, I responded to that, and then it'll go to the next turn, but okay, they're just playing big characters every turn, and I can't really seem to get a point where I can start winning the game. So entirely, I find our top decks are just better than theirs. The only other bad card to really top deck is Lucky Dime or Fishbone Quill, and playing 6 of them, you're probably not going to get that as much, because the rest of the cards are just going to draw you cards, or they are characters to play. Some of those 2-drops aren't that amazing to play, but I find in general versus Green Steel, they really want to stomp you out of the game, and they want to stomp you out so early that you don't get a very high amount of ink, so you're playing top deck ink card. So yeah, definitely into Green Steel. The best thing to do is deny the Diablo shift line, and then get sort of the draw engine set up with the herum. If you want a Mickey build, that's still fine. I think you could just use those turns a bit more valid. And also with the Mickey build, I think maybe not just the Mickey build, just in general with Blue Steel, ramp is it is important. It's a thing we do. It's like our thing. Like their thing is discard, our thing is ramp. But if you are to miss ramp to do something else, maybe control the board, play a Pete to stall a ramp turn, and it's Pete to stall a discard turn. Maybe an Ursula's going to sing sudden chill, and then your following turn is herum. That's also not a bad spot either. I think just jumping to that 5-drop doesn't really do a tremendous amount for us in this matchup, unless it's going to be jump, play, grab your swords, and clear the board. It's a very much a feel yourself out matchup, as playing with blue steel always has been. You've really got to feel how the tempo's going and everything. So yeah, just to sum up, playing into green steel is completely try to fire the cannons. It's just a very powerful card in that matchup. Just to deny the Diablo. Get the herum set up as soon as you can. That would be awesome. Also, the herum engine will mean you can get closer to finding grab your swords or a whole new world. Because the sad thing about the matchup, because the way they've designed Emerald is you kind of want to draw into the card on the turn you need it, and that means that with herum you now have a 3-card draw chance to draw into it because you'll draw for turn, and then herum can quest and you can draw 2. So as I said about that turn 3, instead of being ramp, it could sometimes just be a turn where you play a bunch of Porpsicles and Force Spheres, so you'll set up your herum to be benefiting you as the game goes on. But yeah, there's also the thing of so basically deny, set up herum, draw into cards that are just going to really impact the board and tempo swing, grab your swords, aerial, Tinkerbell, stuff like that. That's just how you play the matchup. There is also the other thing into green steel. This I find I'm going to cover yellow green, just do a close off of that after this. You can, if your just hand is looking terrible, you've drawn one of them 3 uninkable song hands, like maybe you've drawn 2 whole new worlds, or you've just drawn a bunch of stuff you just can't use, no Porpsicles, no herums, but you have got a quill and you've got a 5 or 6 drop. You can just quill your hand down, and if you're able to cheat that out, that's fine, and then you prey on a whole new world off the top. Not going to say uninkable songs, that means your hand would be all whole new worlds, and then trying to draw one would be horrible. But if you're just drawing like a bunch of stuff that doesn't work, no Fortis Spheres, no herums, but you have got a quill into a 5 or 6 drop, it's not a terrible plan to just be like, I'm going to ramp down and you just sing whole new world. You can also see if your hand's really bad and you've got a whole new world in hand, and possibly, they haven't Ursula checked you, and it's like, well, they usually want to Ursula check on 2 because they don't want to do it on 3 because they want to be playing one of their like really strong 3 drops. You can just ramp into these things and maybe pray that they just don't have an Ursula in hand, and then get the whole new world sung and be like, right, we're playing with 7 cards again. Discarding, you're going to give it a go, but we should be able to outdo that, especially if you draw into a herum and a Porpsicle from that. But that's really just the power of whole new world, basically resetting your hand because you've got a bad hand and getting that jump start back into the game. And that's just how the card's always been. It's been the same for Amber Steel as well. They might just they need that little jump start back into the game, so they top deck it, sing it from one of their singers, and then can start flooding again. So definitely into green steel. I like to play the consistent game of herum, but whole new world is also an option. Into yellow green, it's kind of like trying to keep the least amount of non-characters in hand, just because bare necessities is a card that scares me. But the game plan's very much similar. What I like to do sometimes though is just get Smee down, maybe play some Pete's, and just start turning sideways, and you see how much lore you gain. And then a Porpsicle and an aerial, and just play the game of I don't think you have Kida under the sea. Controlling their board, yes, if you get the grab your swords, if you get the Tinkerbell, that's great. Most of them are playing like 3 to 4 Brunos now though, so anything that's not got ward and is a big character is just going to be really scary to play on the board. So Tamatoa is not great, but fire the cannons, grab your swords, keep the board in check, is very, very good. And yeah, just the other side note, I've noticed that no will into yellow-green is just a lot better because all you do is really just top deck big things and just play them on the board. And with those early turns, you just disrupt with the broom and the fire the cannons, and then you just hear them draw for a little bit, and then you just start throwing big characters on the board. They will probably discard you. They discard a lot harsher than Green Steel does, but they're still a very much a winnable matchup. And as I said, if you're playing with the wheel version, though, you do have that jump start back into the game. But yeah, there you go. That's kind of how I'd play it. And remember, sometimes you are just going to get high rolled. Their deck's insane. The cards they have, especially with these morph builds, they can do things like on turn 3, they can shift a Diablo and a Tragic Beast and get a 3/3 and a 5/5 on turn 3. They can do some nuts stuff, really. Like, their deck can be insane. So don't be upset if you do lose some games. Practice a little bit, do open hand games, I think, as well. But generally, you should have a very amount of consistent answers to their deck. and then on top of that you have like one of the best draw engines in the game, which is Herum, and then you have a card that resets your hand like Holy World, and then you have like big steel removal with Tinkerbell, then you have big questers with Ariel. This should be a matchup that you should end up feeling quite confident into, but as I say, it still takes a bit of practice really to get your head into it. To yellow green, I wouldn't feel as bad if you lose it, especially with the wheel version, as like 30 of your cards are non-characters, and they could just grab a lot of this from your hand. With the wheel version, though, like I say, non-wheel, you can just keep throwing bigger stuff down on the board after you've done that early sort of stall on them, and just play some fire the cannons and some magic brooms and stuff like that. But afterwards, you should be fine. Just playing Hades, Simba off the top, and Ariel and turning sideways. Close the game out as quick as you can, really. But later on, they're going to go through all of their discard cards, and they're just going to be playing cheaper characters on the board. Both decks are, in my opinion. They're very much, they want to stomp you out as early as they can. So if you can make it through the early part, you should be fine. I'm just going to cover RP just because I've been playing a lot of RP recently. It's pretty standard. Majority of your deck's not character based. If you draw a non-character, as long as it's not B prep, you can pretty much ink it. I'd gamble on them not discarding the Brawl. This is into green still or yellow green. But you just want to basically cycle your cards, what I find with the 1-drops. Getting a Flynn down at 2 is not important. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes I might do it to pressure them, or I might do it to have a bounce or something like that. But overall, Flynn on 2 is just really not important. There's various tiny reasons when I'd actually want to Flynn on 2. Brawl the Diablo when you can. Get to the rabbits. You can take the gambles on friends. I'm not as experienced as an RP player as some of them are. I wouldn't say I'd say the gamble on friends, keeping it from turn 1 is not great. You kind of want to draw into it and then make something sing it, I think. So sometimes I just set up a Sisu, which is also quite scary because they have let the Storm Rage on Ursula to take it out. Yeah, but basically just do what RP does. Just play a consistent game of brawl things that scare you, like shift targets. Keep drawing cards, and then once you again get to the later stages of the game, your top decks are just better than theirs. All of this deck is pretty much gas. If you mulligan for the 1-drops and the 2-drops, you should be getting them in your earlier turns so they can be turned into ink. And then later on, you'll just be top decking Medusas, Elsas, B preps, just board wipes, draw cards, Mauis, stuff like that. So yeah, there's not really much more to say on that one. It's just basically play the consistent game. Don't worry about your Flynn cheesing. It doesn't matter as much in this matchup. And sometimes it's better to just not set up targets for Ursula to let the Storm Rage on. But yeah, you just play a consistent game of drawing cards, getting to the later stages, then resetting the board. Of course, with Brawl, you can do some early interactions, and Elsa's just a really powerful target. It's not just for the Diablo as well. It's pretty good into the Beast. So if you can get another thing set up on the board, you can Elsa buff to hit the Beast. And if not, you can just Elsa buff to hit the Beast and take out the draw mechanic that it has. So she's just a really powerful card, and I definitely think I'm going to put more counts of her in this deck as well. Just some quick comments on RP, really. I mean, it's RP, you just play consistently and you play the cards you draw, really, don't you? It makes sense to most people, I think. Yeah, that's all my thoughts on discard. As I say, just practice it, go over it, and go try and take those gambles on keeping certain cards in hand, so see if it gets taken by the Ursula or the Bare Necessities. You'll see sort of what they, and especially as well if you have any yellow, green or green steel players, ask them what they mulligan for. Most of them will say they want Ursula on 2, and most of them say they will want the Diablo Shift line. But most of them won't say they would keep a Prince John in hand. They would just hopefully draw into it so they can set up the discard mechanic. But definitely look at it from their angle, because you might just be getting steamrolled by someone who's rolling really hot. But yeah, that's entirely practice it. But there you go. Stop Diablo, Herum set up. He's really annoying for them. Every discard player hates Herum. And then just draw into some gas, draw into some removal, and close the game out.